Good day everyone, I am Frankie Lelan M. Isidro from Marketing 3-2 and I will be discussing Chapter 10 entitled Sexualities. Before we dig deeper into this topic, disclaimer of trigger warning to everyone as this discussion includes sensitive topics such as sexual violence and rape. This chapter discusses the following: sex, the new history of now, sex and liberation today, gendered sexualities, and college hookup culture. We've already seen the sexual regimes of the Puritans, Romantic Victorians, 1920s revelers, and experimental teenagers of the 1950s. The cities, circumstances, and societies in which these individuals lived had a strong influence on their sexual attitudes and behaviors in all cases. The same holds true today. To understand how, we'll learn about the rebel sexual revolution, what happened next, take a closer look at sexuality today, and end somewhere that may be familiar. Sex, the near history of now. Birth rates increased in North America, Australia, New Zealand, and most European countries after World War II ended in 1945. In the United States, they increased from slightly more than 2 children per woman to nearly 4. By 1970, the number of people aged 18 to 24 had increased by more than half. This generation is known as the baby boomers. Youth frequently test boundaries established by adults, and the baby boomers were no exception. Members of this generation fought for African American civil rights and protested the intractable Vietnam War. The desire of boomers to forge their own path rather than conform to dominant sex and gender norms fueled the growth of the women's movement, gay liberation, and the sexual revolution. These movements reinforced permissive rather than punitive attitudes towards sex, including increased acceptance of the non-marital sex and sex between teenagers. By 1960, the first birth control pill was introduced. By 1965, 6 million women had been prescribed the pill. The U.S. Supreme Court granted married people unrestricted access to birth control. By 1972, it extended that right to single people, and by 1973, abortion was then legalized. Men and women could suddenly have sex for fun with far less fear of an unintended pregnancy or pregnancy-induced marriage. Life was changing for sexual minorities as well as trans men and women. In the summer of 1969, a group of trans, gay, and non-binary people changed history by revolting against police harassment in New York's Greenwich Village, launching several nights of protests known as the Stonewall Riots. The first gay pride parades were held on the anniversary of the riots in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco. By 1973, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. Gay is good, inspired by Black is beautiful, became a rallying cry. 4 years after, Stonewall United States had nearly 800 gay and lesbian organizations. Men and women of sexual minority were not only out of the closet, they were out and proud. When HIV or AIDS epidemic was reported in 1981, gay men's community suffered the most, alongside injection drug users and other vulnerable populations. Politicians were slow to support research, prevention, and treatment for gay men because they were belittled. Gay men responded by protesting and turned to their own communities, organizing the world's most effective, safer sex campaign. They were the first in history to normalize the use of condoms. Many children in the 1980s and 1990s received at least some comprehensive sex education, the kind that encourages abstinence while also teaching young people how to engage in sexual activity more safely out of fear of HIV. However, the federal government refused to fund anything other than abstinence-only sex education. Creators of media content discovered that more was more. More fighting, more explosions, faster cars, scarier monsters, bloodier gore, cruder humor, and bigger and badder disasters. And more sex. So much sex that some argue that media has become pornified. with only a thin line separating so-called pornographic and so-called non-pornographic media. Sexual objectification, it is a reduction of a person to his or her sex appeal. Women's bodies have been subjected to more pornification than men's since the 1920s. Media frequently portrayed them as sexual objects, particularly conventional, attractive, and feminine white women. Both men and women are objectified. Gay men more than heterosexual men, but women are objectified far more than others. Pornography has also become more extreme. Today's pornography industry generates billions of dollars per year by producing material that is far more exploitive and violent than in previous eras, involving more physically punishing sex acts and degrading language. Sex and liberation today. The long-standing pressure to say no to sex has been replaced by a different pressure in the decades since the 1960s. Many young people in the United States, though by no means all, have come to believe that in order to grasp their sexual freedom, enact their sexual liberation, and empower themselves, they must say yes. Yes to learning about sexuality, to openly discussing it, to feeling comfortable seeing its all ugliness, and to displaying one's body sexily. Yes to doing it casually and for fun. To say no to any of these things, to be sex conservative. Saying no is now considered archaic, if not regressive. Consider that many people today believe that being a virgin after a certain age is a liability. A third of 15 to 24 years old reported feeling pressure to be sexually active. Some college students choose to lose their virginity in a one-time hookup just so they can say they did it. Feminists were fighting the Victorian ideas of separate spheres and opposite sexes that women are primarily interested in love and men in sex. Women are harshly judged for their sexual behavior while men are praised for theirs. To deconstruct these ideas, feminists needed to do two things. First, undo the sexist idea that women didn't belong on the masculine side of the binary, which included the right to have and enjoy sex without criticism. Second, undo the androcentric idea that things on the feminine side of the binary weren't valuable and good, which included a desire for love and commitment. Women can now enter male-dominated arenas and embrace at least some masculine qualities and interests, such as being sexual and having sex for the sake of having sex. Just like any stereotypical man. A feminine approach to sex, in other words, was framed as repressed, and a masculine approach to sex as free. Many women today take this definition for granted, believing that adopting a masculine approach to sex is a means of gaining liberation and equality with men. Polyamory, the open practice and encouragement of long-term intimate relationships with more than one partner at a time, and open relationships in which committed partners agree that each can have sexual encounters outside their relationship, are becoming increasingly popular among people of all sexual orientations. True sexual freedom would be the right to have sex or not, whenever and for whatever reason, without social repercussions. If you have to say yes, you are not truly free. Indeed, it can feel oppressive for those who don't want to say yes, don't want to say yes right now, or don't want to say yes to anything or anyone. Many people who identify as asexual, homosexual, or bisexual, and immigrants from more conservative countries. Nowadays, many young people believe that having sex is more of a requirement than an option. Even if we are more sexually liberated than in the past, freedom is not the same as equality. Gendered sexualities, sex defined. Monogamy refers to the open practice and promotion of long-term intimate relationships with only one person. As a result, our institutions are still built on the assumption that every sexual or romantic couples consist of one man and one woman, as evidenced by his and hers embroidered towels and wedding ring sets. To reflect this hetero and mononormativity, the normalization of monogamy, the term sex is commonly used to refer to one specific sexual activity, the penile vaginal intercourse. Euphemisms such as home base and all the way are commonly used to refer to that specific activity. It's the it in the phrase, did you do it? This is the coital imperative, the notion that any fully asexual active couple must engage in penile vaginal intercourse, and that any fully completed sexual activity will include it. Women report fewer orgasms than men in mixed sexual pairings, resulting in an orgasm cap. Women who have sex with men have one orgasm for every three of their partners. We, on the other hand, normalize the orgasm gap, treating it as inevitable, because we believe that women are inherently less sexual than men. But this is also incorrect. Instead, we've divided desire, taking the pleasure of lust from women and the pleasure of being lusted after from men. Divided desire. To be sexy is to be an object of desire for others. To be sexual is to have the capacity to experience sexual desire. Most of us want to feel sexual and to be sexy, but we learn to divide these things phenomena by gender due to the gendered love or sex binary. We are told that men are sexual and women are sexy. Men want women and women want men. Men desire women, and what do women desire? Women desire to be desired. Heterosexual male gaze indicates that the content is intended to appeal to a hypothetical heterosexual man. Plot lines and visuals designed to arouse men's desire focus our attention on men's subjectivity. It is their internal thoughts and feelings. This is an acknowledgement of their sexuality, which is positive, but it is also prescription. Sexual objectification, they are told what their internal thoughts and feelings should be. This prescription may limit men who are attracted to women's ability to recognize when they are attracted to women outside of a very narrow ideal. For men who are attracted to men, it may limit their ability to recognize attraction at all. Self-objectifying. It is internalizing the idea that their physical attractiveness determines their worth. Worrying about how they look during sex can lead to a process known as spectating, which involves watching one's sexual performance from the outside. Observing women may try to stay in sexual positions they believe are flattering, arrange their bodies to appear thinner or curvier, keep their faces pretty, and avoid making embarrassing noises. Then we have erotic marketplace. The term erotic marketplace refers to how people are organized and ordered based on their perceived sexual desirability. The term market is commonly used to describe the abstract space in which economic value is assigned to goods and services. Some people have more erotic capital than others in the erotic marketplace. Race, gender, and sexuality. Race, as demonstrated in the chapter of intersectionality, is gendered. Racism and colorism, as well as the socially constructed gender of race, play a role in the erotic marketplace. Politics of respectability. It is a form of resistance to negative racial stereotypes that entails being good and adhering to conservative norms of appearance and behavior. Because people of color are classified in the United States, anything they do may be interpreted by others as reflecting group characteristics rather than individual choices. Eroticized inequality. Gender directly shapes ideas about how men and women should couple. Couples in which the man appears to have more power than the women, for example, appear most natural and desirable due to sexism. Men are expected to be taller, stronger, bigger, older, and more educated than their female partners, as well as to have a higher status job that pays more. Masking is a practice in which some men try to increase their erotic capital by advertising their masculine qualities while concealing their feminine ones. Masking can include participating in sports, emphasizing one's love of the outdoors, or growing a thick beard. Could even mean identifying as heterosexual. And then we have gendered scripts. When sexual interactions take place in real time, they are guided by our understanding of what sex is, how it works, who does what, and what it means. This knowledge or set of instructions is known as a sexual script. and it refers to the social roles that govern sexual interaction. Sexual scripts generally assume that sex takes place between two people. The sexual script is also gendered, with more masculine and less masculine roles. The assertive masculine role in sex entails making the first move, touching first, pushing the interaction along, and removing a partner's clothes. In sex, the feminine role is responsive. A feminine sexuality is one that waits rather than acting or initiating. The masculine partner places the feminine partner in sexual positions. The feminine partner is penetrated by the masculine partner. The same masculine imperative to have sex and the defining of reluctance as feminine is also at work in the push and resist dynamic, in which men consistently press sexual activity in the direction of increasing sexual intimacy, and women stop or slow down the accelerating intimacy when it's going too far. The push and resist dynamic also predictably contributes to sexual violence. Sexual violence. 1 in every 3 women and 1 in every 6 men in the United States has experienced sexual violence. Young people, the working class and poor, racial minorities, people with disabilities, people in prison, and gender non-conforming people are most vulnerable. Men constitute the vast majority of perpetrators, accounting for 97% of those arrested for sexual assault. Even when their actions match legal definitions, these men frequently do not believe they are committing sexual assault. Men who rape are more likely than other men to have experienced sexual or physical abuse. The politics of sexual violence. Women were considered property by the English who colonized the United States. Men had complete control over their property, including the ability to rape it. However, if you rape someone else's property, you harm the goods. So rape was a crime, but it was a property crime, similar to theft rather than assault. Victim blaming is common, with many victims fearing that they will face more trouble than the perpetrator. Only 1 in every 3 sexual assaults is reported to authorities. Only 2% of those reported will result in a conviction. Rape and culture. Sexual violence is a cultural artifact rather than inevitability. It is more likely in some environments than others. Rape cultures are environments that facilitate sexual assault, environments that justify, naturalize, and even glorify sexual pressure, coercion, and violence. Rape culture includes the belief that men are inherently sexually aggressive, as well as the belief that women are inherently vulnerable to men. Rape culture is reflected in the media alongside the social construction of the body. Images that glamorize scenes of sexual force are common in regular programming, as are sex scenes in which women say no and then change their minds, and jokes that trivialize sexual assault, particularly of men. Rape scenes in films and on televisions are common plot twists or character devices. Rape culture also encourages and in some cases compels men to engage in aggressive, push and resist behavior. As a result, many women who have sex with men face sexual pressure, manipulation, coercion, and force throughout their lives. The prevalence of this push and resist dynamic not only creates confusing and uncomfortable sexual interactions, but it also provides cover for people who want to exploit their peers, making aggressive sexual behavior appear normal or at the very least, not so far from the norm. When men act in this manner, it is often dismissed as boys will always be boys. This is exculpatory chauvinism. Men are given a pass for their exploitive, cruel, and otherwise thoughtless and dehumanizing behavior. This dynamic also serves as a catalyst for sexual assault. We teach men, and even women, that being sexually aggressive is desirable, then expect them to distinguish between pushy and criminal behavior. It can be a fine line, and people do cross it from time to time. College hookup culture. Today's stereotypical American college party is a drunken cocktail of elation and recklessness. Things get out of hand. Sociologist Thomas van der Ven observes, but in a fun way. Indeed, the party is euphoric in part because it's a little dangerous. At its climax, it's a different world. Van der Ven refers to it as drunk world, where it's normal for people to fall down, slur their words, break things, laugh uncontrollably, act crazy, flirt, hook up, get sick, pass out, fight, dance, sing, and get overly emotional. Casual sex fits right in because it's slightly reckless but also exciting. Students attend these parties for a variety of reasons, one of which is that the fraternity party has evolved into the college party, the way all students are expected to have fun. Who hooks up? Most students overestimate the frequency with which their peers hook up, as well as how far they go and how much they enjoy it. The average number of hookups reported by seniors is 8, according to a survey of over 24,000 students from 21 different colleges and universities. Men and women hook up at comparable rates, but women experience more regret, distress, and low self-esteem. The Victorians' gendered love or sex binary would suggest that this is because women are more interested in love than sex, and men are more interested in sex than love. In fact, men are slightly more likely than women to indicate a desire for a committed relationship. Women's dissatisfaction is likely due to their greater exposure to sexist and subordinating experiences rather than an aversion to casual sex that men do not share. Gendered power. Because of the gendered love or sex binary, it's assumed that men want casual sex and women don't. So all women are assumed to be hooking up in the hopes of developing a commitment or a relationship. This logic tells men that every woman they hook up with wants a boyfriend, so they should act distant after a hookup to avoid giving the women the wrong idea. Notably, we believe men are superior at hooking up because hookup culture is based on a stereotypically masculine version of sexuality, which is not the only way to experiment with or commit to multiple sexual partners. Consensually, non-monogamous practices, for example, are based on the idea that people can be loving to multiple partners. Emotionally committed to someone without sexual exclusivity. In neither case, does sexual non-exclusivity imply a dismissal of commitment or connection, nor does it necessitate being callous or cold in order to avoid such things. Pleasure and danger. The orgasm gap in hookup culture appears to be a problem. Concerns for women's orgasms grows as two people hook up and then enter a relationship. When men and women are in committed relationships, the orgasm gap narrows from 65 to 20 percentage points, with women having 80% more orgasms than their boyfriends. Hookup culture is a rape culture, so rates are high on campus. Its sexual scripts make coercive behaviors and peers feel normal or luring them into secluded areas of a party while off-scripting a feminized interest in and concern for one's partner. This masks the behavior of students who are misbehaving, intent on raping their classmates, but it also puts all students at risk of rape. If students seek sex with strangers and acquaintances recklessly and assertively, and do so on a regular basis while inebriated, with little regard for the safety of their sexual partners, we can expect high rates of coercion. Communities can band together to change the status quo. Bystander intervention programs, which educate students about sexual assault and teach them how to spot likely incidents and safely intervene, are effective in lowering rates of sexual violence as are programs that teach students to recognize sexually coercive behavior and practice assertive and aggressive responses. The next step may be to think bigger, not just about the acute problem of a sexual assault, but about the many problems in the larger sexual culture. Promoting a culture that values feminine approaches to sexuality, places equal value on female pleasure, accepts sexual minorities and gender non-conforming students, and addresses intersectional inequalities could help make colleges safer places for all students. And that would be all for my discussion. Thank you so much for listening.